the butt, okay? Because that's what they like to do. They like to spray you, put it in your food. I mean, I was eating organic. My stomach felt crazy. I leave the country, not even a day or two into the country. Everything's right. I debloat myself. I look better. I feel better. My hair is actually feeling great. My skin feels amazing. I can actually see and hear better. What the freak are you doing to us in the United States, you devils? You're nasty. You're nasty. Leave us alone. And don't you dare listen to the distractions, y'all. None of the intels are going to tell you what I found out. And what's interesting, because when we got the intel, big up to the Zoomies, because we were on late like Zoom. I think I got kicked off of Zoom the other day. But on Zoom is where my Zoom, two of our Zoomies gave me this information on real time. So this is interesting because after I got the intel, I took screenshots of everything. I was looking online. They're not telling you, y'all. All this Cardi B distraction, all of this other distraction, all these P. Diddy's and so on, y'all, they are trying to lull you to sleep. The real deal is coming in fall. They got something for y'all. Okay, so I'm going to give you the real. And if anybody ever thought to visit a beautiful country with some of the most amazing people, it's going to cost you a little money because their economy is better than mine. They will never tell you that this is a country that's doing better. Chile has got it for you. So big up to Chileans and Chile. Chile is actually a beautiful country. I'm so happy. I'm by the water, which is amazing. One of the biggest waterways. I told you I'm here to get the telepathic messages from the Ice Queen with the Afro living out here. Okay. So, and they're doing something when you travel. So maybe I'll just give that to, I'll probably just tell the Zombies that because they're doing something. And now I realize when you leave the country, they will infiltrate. They know. So that's, for those who are on Zoom, well, yeah, I'll make a video on that. Cause that I think I was talking to Melissa the other day and then I found out some information. So we'll talk about that. Are we at 500 yet? Okay, should I start? Because we're not at 500 yet. I want to, hold on. Okay, so maybe I'll just start. Hey, Susu. All right, I love the water. I watch the water. There aren't any mermaids that I can see in the water. But I will tell you, like, my telepathic abilities, it's not even telepathy. It's a kind of like a, when you're clairsentient and clairaudio, it's everything. Like everything, I feel everything, I know everything. Is in the there isn't that lockdown here. We're at 541. Oh, we're at 5. Oh, y'all. Okay, let's get in. Peace to the east, west, and the north, and the south. This is Fleur coming to you today with some information about the Nazi real. So big up to everybody coming in the house. I want to just talk about some information that it was with me a while ago, but since I'm in South America, especially in Chile, especially, around a few of the so-called Nazis, I want to talk about something I found out and just kind of confirmed from traveling out into Chile. I think a lot of times when you get information, you can't really vet it and source it out, but I was able to source out information about the Vril. And we're going to talk about the Nazi Vril exorcism and the enema that all of you need to do in 2024 in order to be able to make it through the pole shift, the reset, the mud floods, the mother freaking Satanists who are trying to put you in smart freedom cities, whatever they call it. So let's get in the conversation. So many of you know I made the video a while ago. I think that video I took down talking about the Vril. Many of you who know about if you're from the UFO community or you're from the ET community, you've always heard about the Vril in relation to Nazis. And many people talk about the Vril societies where they were almost like occult societies closely tied to the the Knights of Templar, the Zionists, the Jesuits, kind of intermingled, and I really don't think they are. I think they kind of put them together in a goulash, kind of mesh them together, but they're really quite different. The Vril Society was always associated with males, but what I found out that the Vril Society itself is female in the way that it was presented and actually the actual base of the society itself. And if you watch the movie, the show with the Kardashians, which is disgusting, and I don't want you to watch it with your children. I don't want you, I would just suggest that if you watch something like that, because I want you to understand what I'm sharing, because the Vril is kind of embedded in the last American Horror with the Insectilian Queen, one of the Insectilian Queens herself, Kim Kardashian. And when it talks about a society of women that are controlling men from, almost like a parasitic kind of presentation, and they birth certain males into their society, but they control them at all different layers. I talked about the fact that most of the men in power are controlled by insectilian females that literally have them under mind control by using a pheromonic, like a type of insectilian toning frequency, a scent that overtakes males and is able to put them under mind control, and they can control them from that perspective. Now, when we talk in terms of that, the Vril Society is one of these societies that I found out that is a matriarchal based insectilian societies. It isn't a reptilian society, to my knowledge, even though the worms may have some texture, look very serpent-like. They've always been linked to reptilians, but I found out they're quite parasitic. They're like vampires. They're like these little worms that are able to hijack the brain. When we talk about the zombie apocalypse, when we talk about the zombie snails, the zombie ants, the zombie deer, you do understand that what overtakes these, the bodies of an ant, a snail, or of a deer, usually is this little insect, like a worm, a little parasitic worm, that ends up going inside of them, infiltrating dermally, anally, or sometimes through any open orifice. It's usually anally. And what it does eventually, it kind of hijacks the wiring of that host, whatever the host is. Sometimes you need more of these parasitic worms in order to totally hijack the worms. When we talk about nanoparticulate nanotubes, and we talk about chemtrails, we've always talked about chemtrails with these nanoparticulates that are coming off, almost working in sync and working with the electrical field, which is your cell phone, all the cell towers, all the 5G towers, all of the things literally being energetically woken up, so that they start working in sync and they start creating nanotubes that eventually hijack your cerebral cortex and take over your mind, and then eventually to be able to take over your body. Now, when we talk about, I'm going to go into the Vril, but when we talk about this, I want to kind of relate it to the fact that when we talk about people having cravings for sugar, I think many of you realize that usually the first sign that you have a lot of parasites in you is you're craving for a lot of sugary, sweet things. Parasites in themselves, fungi, all kinds of molds, they have this thing for sugar. Sugar in itself is a neurotoxin, and it is a food source for almost 100% of parasites and molds and fungi. If you go around a lot of distilleries in the Caribbean, over in, I think it's in St. Croix, they have a big rum distillery. You will always go outside the distillery and see, because it spews out like almost like sugar out in the atmosphere in these places, you always see like a whole bunch of fungi, or like a type of like spores kind of thing on the trees, because there's a link to what they eat, the fungi and the mold. They like to eat sugar. Sugar is like almost symbiotic with the way that they are able to, it's a source of food, energy, and, and in order to exist. Okay. So, many of you realize that when you're parasitically infiltrated, you will have the highest amount of, craving for sweet things. And that is the reason why Coca-Cola, which I told you in one of the other videos, is that Coca-Cola is the death. Let me explain, since I've been in Chile. Let me talk to my Chileans, because in Chile, apparently Coca-Cola is big too. So I personally think, do I have to say allegedly? Let me say allegedly, so Coca-Cola doesn't come from me, because they're ran by the Deros. I'm sure the Deros is responsible, because anything parasitic, I think the Deros are control of. Just saying it, my opinion. So Coca-Cola is one of the most dastardly, most infiltrating, probably the most chemically damaging sources for these parasites. And that's what you notice in Mexico from my Mexicano people. You know, big up to Selma, who's in Mexico, a couple of the other sea stars who are in Mexico, one of my homeboys who's over in who's over in, uh, no, he's not in Mazatlan. Where is he? He's over in, I forgot. I don't remember. Oh, Puerto Vallarta. He's in Puerto Vallarta. There is a problem in Mexico with Coca-Cola and that being a biggest drug source. And I really feel like if your society loved you, if your government really had protection, wanted to protect you, that would be the number one banned drink for consumption. It should be banned for children ever drinking it. It is literally a toxin. It eats up your inside. It is one of the biggest food sources that all these parasites like to eat and source off of and be able to replicate themselves. But anyway, I'm kind of going off tangent. So when we talk about parasites, worms, and things like that, you have to think that a lot of these parasites source off sugar. But in the context of when we're talking about the Real Society, as I know it, was a society, and they always said that the Real took over the I. And they would have images of like the Pope. They would have images of like political figures, and they would always, you would hear, like, if you ever look online, and you guys can source this out yourself, you can actually look online and see all of these references to the Real Society, and you'll see a lot of politicians and celebrities that they've said that they're making accusations that the eye being blackened or the eye being darkened is a sign that they've been taken over by Real. But I'm here to tell you that I found out that that's cap. Yo, it's crazy to me how they will literally tell you part of the truth, and they will totally divert you from the actual way that they enter into your body by giving you a false image, a false context of how they enter your body by saying it's through the eye. It isn't through your eye. Now we're going to go into how the Real is able to infiltrate, and why in most of these occult societies they make it a point that anal sex is one of the number one acts that needs to occur in order to infect you with the Real. And remember back in the days I was saying, and many of you know me for a while, I was like, why is it that they all want anal sex? Like, I had to figure out, like, what is that? Then a couple of months ago, I found out that they were infecting people, and the actual parasite, remember I talked about this gentleman, and this is all from this gentleman's his own words, so don't come for me. There was a gay gentleman. He had some homegirls. Cucarachis is all off the chain. His homegirls were doing parasite cleansing, remember? And they said they were feeling really good. They did the turpentine one, right? So they did the turpentine cleanse. They were like, oh, you should do it. So the guy was like, he's a gay guy. He was like, you know what? Let me do the cleanse too. My homegirls is Cucarachi season. Everybody wants to be healthy. Most people were doing cleanses, parasitic cleansing, and a whole bunch of things, okay? So he did the cleanse. He did the same cleanse they did, but more intensified. And then all of a sudden, after he had a host of worms coming out his butt, and he cleared himself from the parasites that clearly had changed something about him that he wasn't even aware of, he ended up finding out that when he cleared himself of parasites, his sexual disposition changed. Listen to me, family. You heard me say this before. I'm sourcing this with the Real, so stay with me. He made a video. I think we shared it on Zoom. I shared it on Patreon, so just source it from my Patreon people. Just source it from the stuff we shared. He shared and said, oh my God, all these years he started to be attracted to women. He had never had an attraction for women. He always felt like he was gay. But one of the reasons why he was most likely infiltrated, because in his youth, he was molested by another male anally. The Real is being transmitted through the anal cavity, y'all. They told you that it was through the eye, so you don't think that a worm could come. Now, really, it's kind of hard for a worm to get in your eye. It could. I'm not saying it's possible. You got chemtrails, you got all kinds of stuff, but it's way easier to infiltrate by passing one worm through the urethra I'm not a doctor. Let me put this out there. I'm not a doctor. I'm a crazy person. I'm mentally ill. I'm a trans frog, now turned to a trans seal, about to turn into a trans penguin. This is a comedy skit. This is not real. I'm not a medical doctor. Sometimes I'm a referee. Sometimes I like to be a little sexy. Sometimes I like to not. Okay, so I'm just putting that out there. Okay, so that being said, is that it is necessary for you to realize that a lot of the information that is being perpetuated and shared in public media sites and even in books that are all infiltrated. Now let me say this to you. A lot of times you don't realize, like even with Jason Bashir's, a lot of the readers, like really people who like to read a lot of the archive books. I don't want to take away from that because I think that's a very noble thing to be like a literary kind of person, someone who's big into like reading different books, especially historical books and historical references. What's the Zoom? Oh, the Zoom is, you would have to get on Patreon. I do Zooms, big up to my Zombies. I do Zooms every Sunday and Thursday. Sometimes I used to do it on Tuesday. So I do Zoom on my Patreon. So that's when I represent that. When I talk about Zoom, I'm talking about Zoom on my Patreon page. So don't worry about that. I'm not talking about Zooms I do here. It's what I do every Sunday and Thursday with my group. So let's go back to what I'm saying. So when we talk about terms of this gentleman who had done a parasitic cleanse, who then all of a sudden does a cleanse with his homegirls and finds out that he has been having sexual orientation for men his entire life since he was molested. Not my words, his. And most likely, in my opinion, that he was infiltrated with a male who had a worm and infected him from worm to butt in the anal cavity. Now, I talked about the monkey balls. See, remember, I'm an investigator. I'm a clinician. I'm really big into doing research, especially genetic research. Many of you know me from talking about blood types and what that matters. But in it itself, I kind of sourced this out because remember the whole monkeypox thing, y'all? I got to go back in order to go forward because some of you haven't heard some of my information regarding this. Just remember what I'm saying. I'm going to source back to the real, but I got to go back to the archives to give you examples of where I've gotten this information and how I've been able to source it myself. And I was saying, I'm not mistrusting Jason Bashir's, a lot of the guys who like to read, the scholars, but a lot of times you have to realize all of the books that are out to the public that can be big up to the sister who said this, who could have literally, especially Jason Bashir's was in prison in one time. A lot of the books he read over 20 years were in his prison. You have to realize, you don't think that the cats in array and the fools behind indecision. I just make up stuff. Fools behind indecision. You don't think that they could source books into a certain, because most of your mind control programming, and most of the people that the cats in array have contracted are from prison systems. You know this, right? It's not saying that people know this, but a lot of times if you have prisoners are the number one people that the CIA uses to incept or usurp a population by bringing them out, legitimizing them, pushing them out and forth. Like, remember with Charles Manson? Charles Manson was one of the biggest MK Ultra cats in array projects that they brought out there. He came from that. He was able to be infiltrated when he was in prison system, where they control your drinking, they control what you see, and they control what you read. Okay? They control what you read. Any books out in circulation that have not been banned are okay by your government. They are not to be ever sourced as total truth. I told you that I went to CCNY, City of University, New York. Big up to everyone who went to school in New York City. One of the wonderful professors I had was Professor Jeffries. I had another wonderful Cubana professors with Latin American studies, and also with Professor Jeffries, who was talking about historical studies. I forgot I don't know if it was African studies or it was something. But one of the things I found out when I was sent to the RISM Library. Big up to everybody in New York. And if you went to New York schools with some of these professors, you know what I'm talking about. There was a library called the RISM Library. The RISM Library was a legal, a non-governmental library that moved around every 2 weeks in New York City. It was all of the books that were banned by the government. We were sent there by our professors. It moved around every 2 weeks. The first time I went, it was on Fifth Avenue, off of Fifth Avenue. It was in a private building. I went inside with my backpack, a pencil, and a pad. I could not bring my backpack upstairs to where you source the books, where you were able to look for your books. I had to leave my backpack downstairs and everything. All I could bring is a pencil and my notebook. I went to the second floor. They went, you found the books that you wanted to look for. They would get the book for you, and you could only read it there and source the information, take notes from there. The library moved every 2 weeks. It was all of the illegal books that all governments have banned. So I'm about that life. And that's from Fleur was 17 years old. I started college early. So I was 17 years old, and I was sent to this RISM library. It's probably called something different now. Leonard Jeffries, big up to my professor, Leonard Jeffries, who taught me all of the wonderful beginning parts of not trusting the Willy Wonka systems that have been infiltrating our landscape of the way we think, the things that we know, and historical facts. Okay, so when you have someone like, and like I said, I listen to Jason Bashir. He's actually has some really great information, because he'll read books that I wouldn't read, and he's really a big literary kind of guy. But you have to remember, when you reference someone like that who comes out of the prison system, and the prison is highly controlled by cats in array and fat black intellects. I change the word all the time. Okay, when it's controlled by that, you have to realize, when someone like that gets let out into society and then all of a sudden they blow up, you got to realize, where have they maybe been used? And I think a lot of his information is true, other than the time frame of the pole shift, which he likens to be 2046. And I personally know that it's 2025 or around that time. It's a lot sooner. And the reason why I think they let him come out without any infiltration is because his time frame of when things will happen will lead people to be more complicit, and they won't be ready for what's coming. That's just my thing. But I actually think he's actually a good reference of a lot of literary things, but they're all controlled literary things that he's read. It isn't things that have been banned from society, banned from your reading, all the banned books. I haven't read all the banned books, but I just know that my professor, Professor Jeffries, the craziest professors all in New York City, that's when New York City has some real professors, all told us to go and source our books out of a library that moved around and had all the books that were banned from the government. When have you ever been to one of those? So when you talk to me, I'm a woman of a certain age, y'all. I know sometimes I look a little foxy. I've been on this planet for a little while. I've been around the block. I've lived a lot of places. I come from foreign people. So I've sourced things that majority of people have never heard of, ever seen, or ever had access to. Okay? Let's get back to it. So why does this matter? Because when we hear things about the real society, and you're only being able to source it through archives that are publicly presented to us, you have to realize that in order for that information to still